I don't want partners again, ever. Right?
What do you want?
I just want friends.
Why are you lying to me? That doesn't make me feel better.
I'm just honest because I say what's on my mind.
I'm a nice lady.
That's strange. I don't like other guys looking at my girlfriend.
Everyone's competing for this time right now. And everyone wants to kiss me.
Yeah, everyone wants a little smooch.
For some reason, you're feeling entitled to something.
Being non-monogamous actually increases your dating pool.
Why the fuck are you single at this age? You're the reason you're lonely.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? I think the service that we're doing is we're helping monogamous folks be fucking cooler. Boom.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Quick Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Carbon.
I'm Emily.
I'm Pat.
And welcome to the show. And this episode is sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer and Field, but we'll get to that later.
For relationship anarchists, all connections are equally deserving of love, attention, and autonomy. But does that mean there's no rules? In today's episode, we're talking navigating relationship anarchy one-on-one alongside our guests' personal journey with it and their advice on navigating relationships and dating.
Our guest today is Pat, who goes by Pat, he, they pronouns, who is an academic, lecturer, podcaster, and friend, close friend. Mm-hmm. Pat has dedicated their work towards the ethnographies of humans in sex-positive communities, psychology, and the intersection of the two. Their work explores themes of diversity in sexuality, sexual health, consent, sex worker rights, and alternative relationship models. Pat, welcome to the show again.
Thanks for having me. Again.
Let's start with your personal journey, but the first thing I want to ask, just to get everyone on the same page, is what is relationship anarchy?
It was actually a term that some Swedish person came up with, Andy Nordgren, I'm hopefully pronouncing it correctly, who had a blog and posted what became the Relationship Anarchy Manifesto around 2006.
On Tumblr. Where all good manifestos go.
Was it on Tumblr?
Yeah,
I thought it was.
That's what I found here.
Oh, you did research. I see.
Just in case to fill in your gaps. I don't trust you.
I got gaps to fill. Yeah. Let me have a sip of water.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, the Relationship Anarchy Manifesto had a few key principles. One of which was that each relationship is unique, which basically means don't compare your partners to each other, don't rank them. That doesn't make sense. Instead of entitlement, as in like what I deserve out of a relationship, you try to use love and respect to enable each other's self-determination. So it's about autonomy. Reassessing your values, social norms, and relational hierarchies is another one of the principles that's more often at the forefront of what people think about when they think of relationship anarchy. Enabling freedom instead of duty. So instead of having duties to other people, it's more about the freedom and the choice to make commitments and to work towards where you want to be, not where you're at. So it's the kind of like fake it till you make it principle. Because if you have certain ideals that you want to reach in your relationships, then that's kind of like the guiding light rather than working in whatever is happening at the moment, which might be difficult feelings. And maybe I could talk a little bit about that a little later on.
And it's not necessarily all about romantic relationships. It's actually about placing all of your connections, no matter what they are, whether they're platonic, familial, or maybe a business partner, or like a sexual relationship, is like everyone kind of is on the same playing field, or it just is able to become whatever you want it to be. And there's no expectations based on society's expectations of what it would be. Is that correct?
So the thing is that the original manifesto doesn't say anything about that.
Oh.
There is nothing in there about the distinction between partners and friends, which is partially my reason for wanting a more radical version of relationship anarchy that does extend the principles to all relationships. But again, I have heard time and again that people have understood it this way and are practicing it this way. So maybe beyond the 2006 manifesto, not maybe, for sure, there's been a lot more development since then.
Yeah, I think from what I've been reading online is it does seem like anyone could practice it. Like I was kind of seeing a lot that many people who are kind of on the A spectrum are also potentially practicing it because it relates to them in terms of like valuing all relationships, not necessarily based on what society would say, because if you don't want sex or a romantic connection, if you're aro or ace, then it's like you're able to just like form these connections based off of merit.
I think RA can extend outside of romantic relationships and maybe even outside of polyamory.
That's what Field was saying. I don't know. Can you tell us?
There were other key principles though.
Oh.
Yeah, there's still radical honesty and communication, which is important. And it's kind of important in most areas in polyamory, but not all practice the radical form of honesty and communication. And the ability to customize your commitments.
What makes honesty radical to
Yeah,
you?
that was my question.
So it's not just about being honest about what you have to be honest about, but maybe being honest about things that you normally wouldn't necessarily be honest about.
Such as?
I think about radical honesty as a general principle outside of relationship anarchy, I should say. This is the idea that it might just be better to be honest than to be kind.
Yeah.
So like telling white lies, lies of omission, things that you're trying to do to spare another person their feelings. From a maybe therapeutic perspective, there's some reason to think that that might not be the most progressive way forward.
I don't think that I do this already. I think that I'm
You're
like...
not honest.
No, I'm honest, but like blunt. Maybe sometimes a little too blunt for some people to be able to handle. And it seems like I'm coming off as like a bit dry, but I think I'm a nice person.
Do you think this is where relationship anarchy gets its reputation for potentially being like a bit more self-interested, and it can be like harsh and cold towards people and their feelings? Have you heard this before?
Not necessarily. That's not the typical criticism I hear. But I think in terms of honesty and bluntness, those could be two different things. You could be honest and kind. You could be honest and unkind.
Yeah.
And bluntness tends to be an honesty that's unrefined, as in you're not taking all the steps you might otherwise take to make the truth palatable, or to make it land softly, or to ensure that the other person has the space to process or maybe respond to what you're saying. At least that's the way that I understand bluntness. I don't know if that's how you exercise it.
No, I guess I'd have a different definition of it. Like I mean bluntness as in like I will say the thing that maybe a lot of people are thinking, but maybe they're too afraid to say. I'm not trying to say it in a mean way. I think a lot of the times I say it in like a very nice way or in a palatable way, but it will be fully what I'm thinking versus like I'm going to cushion it with like maybe compliments or like white lies to make you feel better. Because the thing is that when you're honest about something but you cushion it with something else, a lot of the times like the honest bit doesn't fully register.
It depends, because if the honest bit is painful, then that's all that's going to be registered, and the cushionings kind of fall apart, right?
Yeah.
So it's like when you do the little sandwich and you
Yeah.
compliment.
Compliment sandwich.
Compliment sandwich.
And it depends, I guess, on the receiver too. Because if you're a person with anxiety, then you're just going to remember the bad news.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it does have to be catered towards every person because every person receives information differently.
I think it just is like different strokes for different folks. I don't know. I'm also a very honest and blunt person.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I don't necessarily think I think that's just like a neurodivergent thing though. Oh, and we're all sipping tea. I don't know. I like people who are equally as, that's probably why you and I get along. It's like, I like people who are really blunt and direct. And like some other people are just like very polite, like you were saying, but it's like sometimes politeness doesn't get you very far.
Yeah, honestly, I hate when people are like, no, this was so great. You were so good. Or like,
it's like, don't you lie
when
to
I
me.
know that I fucked something up. Like, why are you lying to me? That doesn't make me feel better.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite story around that is I was at a conference, and there was this trans woman there who went up and presented her paper, and it was about issues in psychology relating to transness. And then when she came out, a bunch of us who knew her came up and just congratulated her. And we were all very complimentary. Oh, you did such a good job, blah, 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 blah. It was so good, so good. And she just looked at all of us in the eye and said, "What was good about it?" And then you should have seen
like,
us sweating.
Everyone panicked.
We're like, okay.
Sweating.
Yeah. And there was genuine compliments in there. It's just like we didn't put forth the effort to deliver something that was specific. It was just like a broad strokes, like you were great.
Right.
She'd probably been used to getting fake compliments. So she just asked us to specify. And it was very blunt. It was very direct. And it made us sweat a little bit. But I always remember it because I thought it was a very good move.
Are there any other facets of relationship anarchy that you need to share before I move on?
Well, one thing that's developed since 2006 that's also become prominent is a focus on community interdependence over individualism. So there's a sense in which relationship anarchy is also kind of trying to model anarchy itself as a philosophical principle which requires communities to cohere in small units that will become interdependent networks.
So this like misconception that I shared about it potentially being an individualistic thing is actually a misconception, because like the same thing with polyamory as well is like, while some people who are monogamous would look at it and critique it as like, oh, you're very self-indulgent, maybe like you really want to do things the way you want to do things, you don't care about other people's feelings. It's like, no, actually I really care about other people's feelings enough to be honest with myself, honest with them, and enough to form like bigger groups of community rather than just relying on this one person for everything.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe, I don't know for sure, but maybe this development around community interdependence was in response to these critiques.
Yeah.
But also, it sounds like these critiques are more often levied against solo polyamory. Right?
Fair.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer.
Over the last 5 years, Vizzy has supported our mission to authentically and positively represent the entire LGBTQ2S+ community.
And with Vizzy's vibrant flavors, you can follow your own vibe. Be bold, be flavorful, and above all else, be yourself. Plus, Vizzy only has 100 calories and 1 gram of sugar per can.
Cheers! Must be of legal drinking age, and please enjoy responsibly.
And now, back to the episode.
Can you tell us about your personal journey and how you discovered Relationship Anarchy?
Like most folks, I began my romantic relationships and my sexual life monogamously. And I went through cycles of creation and destruction that were both painful and unforgiving for me, because destroying relationships, and what I mean by this is you start dating somebody, you're monogamous, you go through what I call the incubation period. Some people call NRE, right? New relationship energy. You kind of incubate and you isolate yourself from everybody else. After that, the relationship starts to kind of settle, and over time it will kind of diminish in terms of like the hormones and the feelings and the butterflies and all that. And that slow burn can sometimes fizzle out into nothing, or you can have ruptures, and those ruptures over time will end the relationship. And often, at least in my experience, those ruptures were pretty significant when relationships ended. And it was destructive and it was painful and it hurt. Every time that a relationship was destroyed, if somebody broke up with me or I broke up with them, it feels like I also destroyed a little part of myself. Because I'd invested sometimes 3-6 years with somebody, and then that part of me is kind of gone. Absolutely. And I have to look back on that with pain and sorrow rather than, wow, that was a good investment. That was time I spent with this human being who now is maybe not in my life at all, right? And those are the ones that I remember. It's the people who I don't see anymore, right?
Would you say that you're a sentimental shorty?
Shorty. Sentimental, yeah. I've always been sentimental. I haven't always been short. I grew into it.
Yeah. In hindsight, do you still see broken relationships in that way where it's like you maybe didn't get anything out of it? Because the way I see it is like, I agree. I think people take bits and pieces of you in relationships. Like when it ends, I feel like you've molded your identities together. And then when you merge apart, it's like you're new people. And it's like you've taken parts of each other now and you're going on your own separate ways. But I think in each relationship, there are like many lessons that you're taking with yourself as well.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Of course, no. Of course, that's true.
Yeah.
I've taken many lessons from my relationships with people, even the ones that I no longer see. Yeah. But there's still a sense of pain associated with the ending of those relationships. Yeah. And maybe it's just a feeling of a lack of closure in some ways. And this isn't just exclusive to romantic relationships. Also the friends I've lost along the way, if it's been kind of like a rupture that didn't have closure in some way, that wasn't kind of mutually understood, and using that form of radical honesty, like, hey, there's a reason I don't want you in my life anymore. And when I've been told that before from like best friends, I've had best friends because I moved around a lot when I was a kid. We grew apart. And I kept calling this one friend of mine and I kept saying, hey man, you never call anymore. And he said, honestly, we've just grown apart. Like you have very different interests than I do. And I don't see this relationship, being fulfilling for me anymore. And I said, wow, thank you so much. And it just provided that closure. And I respect him for it, for having done that.
I do feel like those relationships that end without any closure hurt the most. Why'd you stop talking to me? Or like, why'd you disappear? Or you don't invite me to things anymore? Or like, I just don't understand. And I feel like that small explanation would provide a lot of closure for a lot of people. However, not everyone's ready to receive it.
You have to know how to do radical honesty well, not just be an asshole. Because there's people out there who are like, I'm just honest because I say what's on my mind. I don't mean you, because we understand what you meant by bluntness.
Yeah.
But there's some people who will just say nasty things, vicious things that they hold as truth, and they speak it as truth, but it's really their opinion. And that's not what I mean. To be radically honest means to be self-aware enough to isolate whether you have a belief or a feeling in the first place. I believe this to be the case, or I actually feel some way about it, and then to disclose that to somebody else and be open to how that person's going to receive it. When you say something to somebody, you have to be prepared for a no sometimes. And you have to also be prepared that what you say to somebody might hurt them. Whereas if you were honest in the first place, like, hey, I don't feel love anymore. It's gone, right? Which is a hard thing to say. That person, and I've been that person who's received that, and I understood immediately in that moment. I'm like, this relationship is over. It's painful, but thank you for not dragging this out.
Sure.
This would have killed me if I had to go through this for months at a time and not understand what's happening.
So how did you get from these fractures in these relationships to then discovering and practicing relationship anarchy?
I had a monogamish relationship that opened up maybe around 2015 or 16. And in that relationship, there was a lot of self-discovery, mutual discovery, but there was also weird rules and insecurities and codependence. And ultimately, I had to end that relationship. And at that time, I was reading The Ethical Slut.
It's how it starts, isn't it?
It is how it starts. I realized that the values that I had were laid out in this book in a way that made me feel not only good about it, but like it was a good thing to do. It was like an ethical thing to do. And I was like, wow, I'm not wanting something that's immoral. Since the relationship was deteriorating, it was a good time. I felt that confidence and the ability to move on. And yeah, ending a relationship, which I usually been the one that was broken up with. This one was so much harder.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Breaking up with someone.
Yeah.
That lasted way too long, the pain. And that's one of the ones that still has a sense of, unresolved after all these years.
I think it's because when you're the one making the decision and the other person doesn't necessarily want it, like there's still the option there and you're having to like make this firm choice. But when someone else breaks up with you, like they say they're not in love with you anymore, they don't see you in your future, it's like, okay, that's actually closure. But the other one, it's like, oof, now I actually had to make a hard choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to take responsibility for it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And feel bad.
Yeah.
For sure.
What were some of the weird rules that you guys had that was like, I don't know about this?
She had a no penetration rule, which basically meant that I wasn't allowed to have
penetrative sex. Yeah.
Well, it's not, because this is the weird part about it. You can have penetrative sex with your fingers, with limbs, with appendages, right? So like penetration is not a good metric. It was mostly like P and V sex that was referred to.
Got it.
But obviously also probably anal was not probably, for sure it was off the table.
Yeah.
Basically, it was just restricted to no P and V, no P and A sex for either of us.
Right.
And all play had to happen with both of us together there at the same time.
Right.
Which for me, again, didn't make sense because it considered sex in this weird hierarchy where P and V sex is like the apex.
The ultimate. Yeah.
Immediately, like my thoughts were, well, there's so much queer sex that is kind of being marginalized by this idea, this practice. It felt like the practice was somehow doing a disservice to sex in general and queer sex specifically. I just didn't feel comfortable with it, and I still don't have the language to even describe the rules in ways that make me feel comfortable now. Those are the rules, and I didn't agree with them, and in the end, what terminated the relationship was me getting a sense that she was actually breaking her own rules. And I was like, this is highly ironic because I didn't care about them in the first place. But when you set up a boundary, right?
Yeah, and then you disrespect it. It's cheating.
Then you know what betrayal looks like, right?
Yeah.
Did we get to how you discovered Relationship Anarchy?
Not yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
continue.
Continue on this.
If you look down, you're actually chained to your chair.
Well, my legs are numb a little bit. Fast forward to my first polyamorous relationship, which was right after that one. 2018, I ended this one, and then I ended up dating somebody else. And it was my first polyamorous relationship. Only lasted 6 months. And it's a person who is still in my life today, who is a friend, who I love very much, and we have a very fluid and have had a very fluid relationship since 2018, which is the catalyst for some of the ways that I understand relationship anarchy and my idea for what might be a more radical form of it, which I don't really know if it is, but we'll get there. After that, I ended up dating Yaz, whom you've had on the show, and we dated for 5 years. And from that relationship, I learned a lot. I learned about strong communication from Yaz, which I am eternally grateful. Holding support for one another and working together to repair the relationship, not against one another. So we were practicing the principles of relationship anarchy from the get-go. We just didn't know what it was called. I didn't really have, I knew about it. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind that, hey, I'm a relationship anarchist.
Right.
But over time, we began to adopt the label because we're like, this is what we're doing.
That's actually a lot more people are already practicing relationship anarchy. They just didn't have a name for it. I have stats on this. After hearing the definition, 1 in 5 people globally and 1 in 2 people on field realize they've done it too. So it's like people are definitely having similar experiences to you. And it's actually more common in the gender diverse and queer spaces as well.
Well, duh.
Obviously.
I feel like
Cool people do cool things.
Yeah.
Newsflash.
Yeah.
It's framing it in a positive light, which I also did.
Yeah.
And I said, I found that relationship anarchy aligned with my values and principles around autonomy and like anti-capitalism. But then I thought about it from the not so positive lens for myself. And I'm like, well, it also really helped soothe my anxious attachment, my generalized anxiety disorder, and my neurodivergence, my ADHD.
How did it do that? And how you said that was negative that it did that?
No, it wasn't negative that it did it. I'm just saying that perhaps part of wanting these values was to heal or to soothe those mental health concerns, which then, as you said, these stats, and we're talking about queer and gender diverse folks, they're also disproportionately high on mental health concerns because of marginalization. So maybe RA for them is also a way of helping alleviate some of the symptoms of things like anxiety and various forms of attachment that aren't secure.
How do you feel it does that?
Neurodivergence. Well, I think I found myself to be a lot less anxious in a relationship where I felt the freedom to do what I wanted without feeling guilty about having those wants in the first place. Having said this, monogamy can also be exercised in this way.
we always have to do a disclaimer of like monogamous folks can too.
Yeah. And some do, but it was not my experience. In monogamy, the template that I had, probably from not great sources, was, that jealousy was the norm and you had to be jealous and you had to take it seriously, even though for me,
that's what love looks like.
Yeah, the feeling was not quite there. What it did was it did trigger insecurity because I'm like, I'm supposed to feel this way if my partner has interest elsewhere. And most of all, the one that never made sense, right, which a lot of the people I grew up with, especially guys, they were like, oh, I don't like other guys looking at my girlfriend. I'm like, what are you, stupid?
Yeah.
I'm like,
it's like that means I have a hot partner.
Exactly. I'm like, doesn't that reflect on you and your need for approval, idiot?
I've also always found it fun to check people out together. Like, I've never felt jealous in that way. You know what I'm saying? Like, some people, the level of jealousy within monogamy is so intense. Like, you can't like someone else's photos. I'm looking through your follower list. Like, it can get very intense.
Definitely a level of wild that I've never experienced like already. But I think even just now being around these terms, this new knowledge, experiencing polyamory and all these different things, like my mind has opened even further. I feel like even if you don't subscribe or vibe with certain relationship structures, there's a lot to learn from them.
I think the other thing that it helped kind of soothe were symptoms of ADHD, which I was only diagnosed about 1.5 years ago, so I lived my entire adult life not knowing. Damn, it should have been clear because...
You're just special.
Of 18 criteria, that's what there are, 9 and 9 for impulsivity and inattention. As an adult, you need to meet 5 to get diagnosed. I had 13. Yeah. 13. So it's
I
not
wonder
like...
how many you meet.
Oh, all of them.
All of them.
Yeah, I was like immediately diagnosed. It's with some people, especially as a fellow ADHD person, you hang out with them and I can diagnose people.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, you don't need a doctor. I've diagnosed majority of my friends that I've met.
course.
I'm like, literally like for 2 seconds into a conversation, I can be like, ADHD.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, we're making eye contact.
we're vibing.
And vibing 100%. Yeah. You're fucked. One of the ways that impulsivity shows up for some folks is hypersexuality.
Yep.
And, I like that.
Slut era
Slut era.
is actually the whole
Right?
era.
Imagine how inhibiting it is to have that hypersexuality festering in a monogamous relationship where it's hard to even talk about because the other person is also following a script which says you shouldn't be interested in anybody else. And I have to inhibit that and say, of course I'm not interested in anybody else. Because if I say the opposite, then the relationship is over. And there goes my anxiety as well being triggered. So now I have to pretend that I'm not looking at anybody else when I am. And I have to pretend I don't have desires for anyone else, which I do.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where the importance of like the radical honesty comes in is like, well, when you're lying to someone else, you're also having to like lie to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's painful too.
And again, I know I've heard of monogamous folks who actually do talk about desires outside of the relationship. And it's very open and it's very cool between them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear it because that was my experience and that wasn't the experience of a lot of people that I grew up with.
I think most people got the same handout that you're talking about.
This is the thing, the service that I think we're doing at this episode and just generally yakking about polyamory all over the map and making it. Yeah. Like, do you see how
Yapping?
visible polyamory is now? Whereas
Yeah.
like
Oh,
10
yeah.
years ago,
Very.
100%.
people didn't hear about it. Now everybody kind of knows what it is.
Oh yeah.
I think the service.
My mom knows what it is.
Yeah. I think the service that we're doing is we're helping monogamous folks be fucking cooler.
I agree. I totally
We just are.
God's work.
Yeah. Because now there's like, oh, we can permit ourselves to have honest conversations about things without necessarily having to change our boundaries, but at least feeling more comfortable.
Yeah.
Because, oh, if I had heard about this, even if I wasn't prepared to become polyamorous, I would have said, oh, so it's normal to feel interest in other people and not feel like guilt and shame around it.
And learning that it can be ethical.
Blah, wong.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, this isn't a bad,
you-
horrible thing.
Polyamorous folks and like relationship anarchist folks are basically like, hey guys, it's cool to be honest. And then everybody's like, whoa, what?
Yeah. You still haven't told me how you got to Relationship Anarchy.
I did.
Tell me, goddammit.
I did. I said, Yaz and I started practicing the principles of it inadvertently because it seemed to be our
Right.
mutual
I remember
values.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you find the word? Yeah.
Honestly, I don't remember, but it was somewhere in our relationship that we started using Relationship Anarchy because we knew we were polyamorous from the get-go. We just didn't know what kind. And eventually Relationship Anarchy just became part of our
Your lexicon. Ooh. I like that word. Doesn't that sound fancy? I sounded a little smarter than I am, didn't I?
What is a lexicon? Well, it is all the words of a language taken together that makes up what a language is.
I remember last time that you were on the podcast, you said after all the relationships that you've had, it doesn't steer you away from polyamory or relationship anarchy. You're actually seeking even more radical honesty and relationship anarchy. Like, what does that mean to you?
Boom. You hit
Here
the
goes the
nail.
dynamite. Time for my sales pitch.
I'm trying to get this right. You hit the nail on the head. I keep saying you hit the nail on the hammer. That's how bad I am at that phrase. But this time,
I
got it.
actually really love it when people mess up phrases and sayings. I think it's like so endearing when people just like constantly can't get the right saying. You just say it wrong.
Oh, that's
like
cute. Anyway, go ahead with your nail on the hammer.
What was the question?
Yeah.
Why you more radical for? What does that mean?
Okay, so it stems from this idea of me not having seen the distinction in the Relationship Anarchy Manifesto, not having made any sort of remark about the distinction between partner and friend, right? So again, there is this version which says, we extend this to all relationships. And I was thinking, this is what I want to do. I want to extend Relationship Anarchy to some extent to all my relationships. But what that means for me, coming out of this last relationship with Yaz, is I had this kind of statement in my head. I was like, I don't want partners again, ever. Right?
What do you want?
I just want friends. I want friends who I'm in love with, friends who I'm romantic with, friends who I'm in sexual relationship with, friends who are platonic. And most of all, I want there to be fluidity that exists in those relationships, which permits for those relationships to change.
Do you
Right?
think maybe you're just a little hurt?
Always.
Damn.
Yeah.
I get that. Like when you come out of like a big partnership and you just shared your life with someone, you just did all the untangling of coming out of that relationship, it can be really hard to be like, oof, I'm going to jump in that and do that again.
I think what we need to qualify here is what I mean when I say I want to have friends and not partners. Yeah. What I mean by that is I want to treat my friends as partners.
Yeah, that's different though. You know what I mean? Because I think what you said before is like, I want to have friends, not partners. I feel like it sounds more like I want to live my life alone with like people around me. You know what I mean? But seeing friends as partners sounds like you want to build a life with friends.
Correct. Yeah. I want to create a life with the people that I love,
Yep.
independent of what that love looks like.
Totally.
Right? Mm-hmm. And this is the thing. I want to permit there to be change in the relationship as a fluid principle. So there's a few things in there that are, at least for me, a little bit theoretically dense. The first of which is the least theoretically dense, which is when people ask me to explain polyamory, my approach is usually to say, well, think of our most successful relationships. What are they? Rhetorical friendships. And I say, why not build our romantic relationships around our most successful model, which are friendships? In thinking that, I kept trying to figure out how to better exercise that. How do I better have the kind of security and commitments that I have in my friendships, in my romantic relationships, without all the fear, without all the turmoil, without all the ups and downs and termination and whether you call it decoupling or breaking up, right? There's still a lot of that happening. And not that those things can't necessarily happen in friendships.
Yeah. I was going to say, what makes you think that friendships are so successful?
At least in my experience, they have been the most successful relationships I've had. And
A little bit of back and forth here. I like this.
Well, we're in the middle of what the government has called a loneliness epidemic. You know, like a lot of people actually don't have friendships, especially friendships where you feel like you can really lean on someone in the way that like a romantic partnership would be. So I think a lot of people actually don't know how to form lifelong or just long-term friendships where you can actually ask for something in like a community type way, like give and take and show up for someone else as well. I think we're living in a very hyper individualistic society, and a society that tells you that you should only rely on one other person who's your romantic partner.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors at play there. So there is individualism, which is supremely high in North America. There's capitalism and the instability of our existing economy, which has increased scarcity. So there's scarcity of resources. We can't afford housing. We are overworked, overeducated, underpaid.
Yep.
And because of that, it also creates a scarcity of time. When we have a scarcity of time, and when we spend so much of our work time kind of being progressively more solo, right? Since the pandemic, a lot of people do remote work, and it's a lot less communal work. And because of social media as well, has taken up so much of our social space, we've deteriorated one layer of social interaction, which used to be the village, right? And in the village, you had to just get along with people, even people that you were politically opposed.
Totally.
Like if the bridge is burning down, right, in the village, you both have to do something about it because you need it, whether you agree or disagree politically. And that way, that kind of overlap in communication builds strength in a village and in a community, and it allows for dialogue to happen. It allows for change to happen in constructive ways rather than political polarization, which is also a driving factor.
So should we burn more things down?
I'm getting the hint. Yeah.
Sorry,
But I like the language flip of treating your friends like partners rather than the other way around. I feel like the term as a society has more meaning than maybe to you as an individual. The term partner is like higher ranking than the term friend for, I think, globally as a society. So maybe if we like flip it, it still means the same thing, but in terms for like other people to understand. I do like that and subscribe to that because the more time that you invest into your friends, the stronger the bond, the stronger the relationship. Yeah. And I think that when you transition out of a romance with somebody, when you fall into that relationship ladder that you were talking about earlier, where like you isolate yourself to just the two of you and you don't invest any more time into the other relationships that you had in your life. If that person is no longer with you, then you essentially are by yourself, and you realize when you look around that you have nobody else to lean on. So when you treat more friends like partners, if that person transitions out of your life, say like the romantic partner, then you still have all these other people that you can lean on. There's been times in my life where I've transitioned out of a romantic relationship with a partner, and I'm left being like, whoa, I have nobody, or who am I without this person, you know? And I feel like the more people that you have around you that are like nice, strong, close bonds, the easier it is to pick yourself up afterwards.
100%.
Yeah, and I think in a hyper individualistic society, like you're saying, that is forcing us to work longer and longer hours, and then the time that you're not spending working, you're preparing yourself and just doing the things to keep your body alive, like preparing your meals and doing all of that stuff. So it's like very challenging for you to actually go out and invest in friendships. But I think it just comes down to intentionality, like really investing into those friendships the same way that you would invest into a romantic relationship. Like if you can find time to have a romantic relationship, you can also find time to like spread that out.
Yeah.
You know?
In capitalist terms, it's diversifying your investments.
So
Work.
So there's two things there.
Yeah.
A, I'm glad you got it all from the phrase treating your friends as partners. You literally outlined what I was going to say. So I'm just glad that the phrase itself does so much of the explanatory power. And in terms of what you were saying, I think last time I was here, I talked about some podcasts I had listened to, and now I can't remember what it was, where it was talking specifically about why we are so exhausted and investing less in our friends. Part of that was social media, because algorithms and AI are designed to exploit your psychological weaknesses in an attention economy, right? The more attention you pay to the app, the more money it generates off of your data. That is like a quick sort of dopamine release, right? And quick dopamine is like quick spike and then drop. So you need to constantly do it to get more and more and more so that you're feeding that high. Whereas slow dopamine are things like hanging out with people and having conversations. And the more we exercise the fast dopamine version, the less we have of it left over at the end of the day. So if you spend a few hours on social media, at the end of the day, the prospect of leaving your home and getting into an Uber or getting onto the TTC and then making it over to some place to see some people feels exhausting.
Yeah.
Right? And even if you do make it there, you are exhausted, and slow dopamine is going to feel like it's not good enough.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to pay attention to your friends. You'd be like, you're not as quick as the TikTok I was watching.
There's two things that I've heard on that in terms of like why we're so exhausted. One of them being that, like you mentioned, social media, and leaning into that is that because social media is meant to make you feel like you're stepping into somebody's world and like they're really letting you in, whether it be through stories or through posts, you feel like you know them better. You almost feel like you've hung out with them already. So hanging out with them in person seems less important, or like you want to make less of an effort because you already saw what they did throughout their day. And the second thing is actually decision making. I saw this in like Johnny Harris little docu-series about why we're so tired all the time. The more decisions that you have to make throughout your day about like, oh, I got to send in like that receipt, or I got to like check Facebook, or I got to check my messages now. You're making more and more decisions just like from the moment that you wake up. Therefore, your brain actually becomes a lot more tired throughout the day. This is actually, there's a lot of studies being done on it now, and it's being proven that the more decisions that you make throughout your day, the more tired that you're going to be.
Yeah, those are mental resources that you're exhausting. And if you wake up in the morning and your first question is not like, what am I doing with my day? But rather, how do I get all the tasks that I need to get done? You check your phone and you have messages and emails and all the things that you need to respond to. And suddenly like your brain is just, it's like your inbox, right? When you update it and then you just have like 25 new emails. That's my brain when I wake up, and it sucks.
The mess up thing I saw too was at a Netflix board of directors meeting or investment, whatever, one of their meetings. They were saying they're no longer competing with other apps. They're now competing with sleep. So they're like trying to capture more of your attention and like
So
keep
that you
you
don't
from
sleep?
sleeping. Yeah. So
That's
that is what they're
crazy.
competing with, which is just gross. Like I think the message there really is to create and connect more than you're consuming.
So you asked if there's anything we should be burning down. I'm not saying I'm not saying Netflix. What I'm saying is we have to burn down these values. We have to burn down what we're consuming. I deleted my Amazon account for Prime and for their streaming services. I deleted my Netflix account, and I just stopped watching TV, which is like the hipster thing to do. But I just
You're so
did
radical,
it.
dude.
Yeah,
There's so many good shows out right now.
I just did it. I said, I'm not going to watch TV when I'm alone. I'll just
Yeah.
watch it with people if I want to watch a movie or something. Because I'm trying to get on that slower dopamine kick and just trying to not waste my life. Because if I look back 5 years from now,
And you
the
just
8 hours I
watched.
spent watching TV one day, I'm not going to remember it. It will not have made an impact. In fact, it's just wasted time.
If you're watching this episode and you're thinking open relationships do sound like the thing for me, but I just don't know where to start, where do I go? How do I meet people? Where do I put my hands? I know exactly where you should put your hands, and it's on the dating app Field. That's actually where the two of us started exploring when we just opened up our relationship.
The dating landscape is riddled with alienating behaviors like mindless swiping and ghosting. It may seem inconceivable that anything else out there exists, but it does. You have options. Field, the dating app for the curious, is a space where open-minded people come to playfully explore each other and themselves. In the same way that entering a different room can bring out a different side of yourself, stepping onto Field may reveal new parts of yourself that you haven't met before. There's breathing room to explore your desires. Think relationship anarchy, cuddling, being a brat. And find communities that share your interests. Think D&D, tennis, zine making. Free from ads and completely independent, this is the space that draws curious, playful, open-minded people such as yourself. In connecting more deeply to yourself, it's possible to find your people and build the community that you've been looking for. Here's a little preview of what life is like on Field.
I used to think I was too femme to be dominant, too feminine to be anything but a woman, and too boxed in by labels that I never chose. But then I got on Field. Exploring ethical non-monogamy and kink there cracked something open in me, and I started playing with dominance and stepping into a side of myself that I had always kept at an arm's length. By the end of the year, my gender and sexuality had shifted in ways I never saw coming, and I'm not the only one. 62% of Field members evolve their desires, identities, and interests within their first year on the app. When you're in a space with no expectations, no boxes to squeeze into, you get to see what's actually yours.
So get out your phone right now, go to the App Store or Google Play and download Field. That's spelled F-E-E-L-D. Thank you, Field, for sponsoring this episode.
Anyway, back to the question at hand. What's more radical about this this version that I had? So the thicker theoretical parts, I think I can refer to as temporality and relationality. My
Big
friend,
words.
yeah, my friend Lewis, who was here with me and Amanda on the podcast when we talked about what the hell did we talk about?
Open relationships.
Open relationships. He had this one really nice line. Time and proximity creates its own hierarchies. Relationship anarchy is supposed to be anti-hierarchical. But what that actually means is not that we are intolerant to hierarchies. It's just that we're vigilant. We watch out for them because we want to assess and make sure that we want to have the hierarchies that spring up and accept
So it's not
them.
anti-hierarchical, it's just you're very intentional about the hierarchy that's being created.
It could be anti, but the anti just has to mean that it's not like you will have no hierarchies.
Yeah.
Because hierarchies, again, will manifest naturally.
Yeah.
If I spend more time with somebody over time, that bond that's created there places that person emotionally closer to me than somebody who I've spent less time with. Time and proximity creates its own hierarchy. So just being aware of that and knowing what you're getting into and when it's happening, using radical honesty to disclose that to partners like, hey, maybe I'm feeling closer to this person right now. That could save that relationship from continuing down that path, and then you're letting one other relationship wither. The temporality aspect, right? Time, if we look at it philosophically, basically just means change. There's no change without time and no time without change. How do we know time passed? Well, we measure change. What changed since time slice A to time slice B? So what that means for me is that relationships will change. It's a necessary component because they exist across time. And if we expect that they'll change, then why not build our relationships with that in mind and allow for that change to happen fluidly, to happen consensually, to happen as part of our reassessment of our commitments to each other, because relationship anarchy also has commitments. It's just ones that you negotiate and reassess together based on your self-determination and your interests. And because relationships change and you allow for it to happen fluidly, then a romantic relationship that transitions into a platonic one isn't such a surprise. It's less painful and it could be done more gracefully. That's not to say it's a foolproof plan, but this is what my thinking around it is.
I was going to say, like, I like the idea of it and I like the sound of it, but there's that voice in the back of my head that goes, you can't always protect yourself from pain. It just happens. Of
course.
As prepared as somebody can be for a certain outcome, I think pain is pain regardless. And something might be just as painful even if you expect it.
This is true. So let me qualify that as well. So pain will happen as well. It's part of the ways that we move through the world. We're not always going to like the decisions that people make around us, our friends, our family, our partners, and it will affect us. But having a supportive relationship with that person can make that pain be something meaningful versus something that feels like you struggle to kind of grasp the meaning of it. One that makes you feel alienated, alone, and suffering alone with your problem. So again, I think back to those relationships that ended, that I can't communicate with that person anymore. And I'm like, I still don't have kind of closure. But so long as people remain in your life and they're committed to having communication with you, you can open those discussions back up. Or if you've had closure already, then you ostensibly don't need to open things back up.
Can I read you the definition that I found of relationship anarchy, and can you tell me if your more expansive version feels the same as what I found? Relationship anarchy is about building your connections based on mutual values, not societal expectations. It's rooted in the belief that love and intimacy shouldn't follow a hierarchy, romantic or otherwise, and that each relationship can be customized by the people in it. Based on anarchist principles, this approach dismantles hierarchies in love and lets people build the relationships they want with empathy, honesty, and respect, not obligation, ownership, or rank. Does that feel like what you're describing to us? Because it's definitely grown since that 2006 initial version.
Like I said, the ways I've heard people talk about relationship anarchy more recently sounds a lot like what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The only single difference that I still would make between what I've been talking about and maybe this definition, in not using the term partner anymore and talking about everybody as friends, this linguistic term for me, I think, has an important meaning. Because language is the carrier of meaning, if we continue to use the terms partner and friend, you talked about how partner is held hierarchically above friendship in our society. So when we say partner, we signal something to the world. And people understand the meaning of that as being, this is important, this is somebody I'm building my life with. When we say friend, it signals something else. This is somebody who I'm close with, but there is no version of friend that looks like the partner. Right?
Like you're not necessarily building a life with them.
So by removing the word partner,
is partner the problem though?
Unless we want to re-educate everybody on the thick with theory shit that I'm talking about, then in at least me using the term friend, it does two things. One, it redefines friendship as the most important thing in my life, which I like, and that friendship can be, again, love, romantic, whatever. It also removes some of the pressures of what partnership means. It's like sometimes that word is scary.
Feels like
for
it
people.
has an escalator.
Right.
Again, what we're not reassessing with relationship anarchy is the inherent hierarchy that exists in the term partner as distinguished from friend. And so long as we continue to use that language, it'll sneak back up on us. Because if I refer to somebody as partner, suddenly expectations, unconscious, implicit expectations will be generated. And if I refer to somebody as my friend, those are tempered by what the definition of friend is. So it's also in some ways treating your partners as friends, because now suddenly they don't feel like they are entitled to more, and you don't feel like you have to provide more from this like inherently deeply welded in script.
But what if you do want more?
I like to use the term platonic partners.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is a partner does denote that you are building something together. You're more invested in each other, and I think it can be platonic for sure. I think a partnership, it can be whatever you want it to be if you talk about it. But I do see what you're saying. I just feel like it feels more individualistic, in some ways. Say you do want to buy a house with someone, or you want to create a family, like have a kid with someone, whether it's romantic or not, maybe you're like adopting or fostering children together. Like it can look like however you want it to look like. But I do think that's more than friendship at a certain point, is like you're building things together, and is that still friendship?
Well, imagine doing all of that, but referring to the people that you're doing that with as friends. It does feel a little weird.
It does.
Yeah.
This is my friend with whom I have a child and live together with.
Yeah.
Right? It feels like you're not giving them enough. But that's what I'm trying to sneak in here with the language is like, why shouldn't friendships have the possibility to be that? As soon as we put that sticker on it, the partner sticker, then suddenly that person's better than your friends.
Right.
And society will acknowledge that with laws, with policy, and it will continue to perpetuate the same cycle. I want to build a life with the people that I love. And these are my friends. And some of them are friends that are lovers. Some of them are friends that are romantic. Some are friends that are platonic. And I want to have platonic life partners and lovers as life partners and people I'm in love with as life partners, and have the ability, the fluidity for those relationships to change, while the deeper commitments, which is I want you in my life, not to change. And of course that can change. Like sometimes you might not want somebody in your life anymore, but you'll have to go through that.
I appreciate the way you explained that though. It did. You convinced me.
Did I?
Really?
You did, yeah.
Are you
yeah.
sold?
Yeah,
Nice.
no, I agree
Welcome
with
to
you.
the cult.
Yeah, I don't know if like
I said I didn't want to be converted.
I don't know if I'm joining, but I agree with your logic and your reasoning. Yeah.
I still have I think different terms that I like to use. Like how I said, I like to use the term platonic partner in terms of like just somebody really close to me that I want to continue building a life with and have in my life for a really long time, but doesn't necessarily hold like a romantic connection or a sexual connection.
But what is the terminology protecting is the question here.
I think it's we have a mutual agreement. You know what I'm saying? That we do want to do this together, because some of this, like building a family together, doing those kinds of things, it does take a bit of a long-term commitment, for sure.
I think for me, it's a commitment thing. Like I have friends that I call friends that I don't feel are like committed to building a life with, but we like to hang out.
I mean, in some ways, it's nice to have people where it's no pressure.
Yes.
Where there's not any expectation or anything, but there's some people that you're like, I will show up for you no matter what, and I will absolutely be there for you. And to me, that does denote a bit of a commitment that we've like agreed to each other that like, if say like you're in the hospital or something, I will be there for you for sure.
Yeah.
You know?
We refer to, friends as friends, and maybe our closest friends as best friends. These are my besties. No,
but that's hierarchy.
But it's a hierarchy that I'm aware of and I choose because I've acknowledged the proximity and temporality, or as I said, the temporality and relationality.
I don't want to invest the same amount of energy into everybody that I meet.
No, of course not. No,
and relationship anarchy doesn't say you have to do that either.
No, I know. But
maybe I should have been clear about that. Not all your friends need to be treated as partners. My only thing was just the categorical distinction between friend and partner has a hierarchy that I'm not comfortable with.
I do agree with that.
And I want to reassess that so that I don't have these expectations and the people that I'm with don't have this entitlement.
Fair. Yeah.
Which is very consistent with RA, with Relationship Anarchy. Yeah. Even though Lewis and I have been mulling this over, we want to kind of call this relational fluidity. And I think an added dimension to this, like I said, there's relationality. So temporality, time, which is change. Relationality, which is the kind of relationship and proximity, how much time you spend with people. For me, a relational perspective, this is how I learn who I am, how I show up in relationships. They reveal who I am. And this counters the sort of individualistic perspective, at least for me, in capitalism, because it's not about who I am independent of the people in my life, but it's about who I am because of them, right? So the people that I choose to be in my life, the ones that I build lifelong commitments with, whether platonic, romantic, sexual, those are the people that will continue to reveal who I am.
Absolutely. I think you build each other's character in spending time with somebody. And the people that you spend time with do speak a lot to your character as well. If you are following this model and say you do want to have that kind of commitment with somebody, how would you go about being like, okay, we're like agreeing to do this? How do you do that? I guess it doesn't necessarily need a title, but you just have a conversation that we're agreeing to do this.
So here's the weirdest part too, because like when I thought about this, what I called a more radical form of relationship anarchy, which I'm not sure that it necessarily is, but maybe this partner friendship thing is the radical part, was how do I practice this if other people don't want to do it?
True.
And then I realized, I'm like, that's the fluid fucking component. That's the other radical part, which is that I don't need other people to be on board for me to do it. I could have relationships with people in my life who are monogamish, who are open, who are practicing different styles of polyamory, so long as our commitments to each other are on the table as something that we get to reassess along with our values, the hierarchies that come up, the social norms that forge those hierarchies, and we still have our self-determination and our freedom.
I think that does tie into the radical honesty again, is if everything is continually up for discussion, then you're never just under the assumption that this other person is continuing to feel the same way that you're feeling. And then things are less likely to blow up in your face unexpectedly if you're constantly having communication.
I feel like a lot of queer people naturally fall into relationship anarchy without knowing that it's relationship anarchy, in the sense that, for example, in the lesbian community, I see a lot of people who were exes who are still friends, who still do projects together, and their exes meet the new partners, and the new partners are friends with their exes, and they're all kind of friends and they know each other, and there's no like exclusivity as to like who you can know and who you can have a relationship with just because they were perhaps, a romantic partner once. And I feel like regardless of like the scale of relationship anarchy, it like qualifies as such. That's why I feel like a lot of queer people naturally fall into relationship anarchy, because we're already sort of deconstructing what relationships are.
Well, this is what I liked about Relationship Anarchy, is it seemed to me like the Relationship Anarchy manifesto, though it's cited to one person, this person says that this came out of a community and out of discussion. And it seems to me like Relationship Anarchy was actually a descriptive, not a prescriptive model. It came about as, we're doing some stuff. What are we doing? Oh, it looks like we're doing this and it feels good and it works, rather than a prescriptive model, which is we should be doing this and should be doing that and blah, blah, blah.
But
blah,
no
blah.
one's tried it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like even with my relational fluidity, I'm kind of adapting to changes that I'm observing have been important in my relationships.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to give a sort of descriptive model of what seems to be working that align with my principles and values, and hoping that I find other people who are interested in that along with me.
Yeah, and I think monogamy is very prescriptive for sure. And when you start non-monogamy, I think everyone is kind of just like making small edits as you go, because you're now writing your own script for the first time, which is challenging and a little bit scary and a little hard.
My existential side is going to come out, but freedom is one of the most terrifying things that we have.
Totes.
Right? Because it's confusing, it's challenging, but also rewarding. So it's like, it's not always clear what you're supposed to be doing. And that's kind of like the terrifying aspect of freedom that comes up in polyamory. But it can also feel like the right thing, which is maybe the liberating aspect of freedom. That's the reward.
Experts from the dating app field recommend anyone interested in starting relationship anarchy first questions the norms around them and the relationships that you already have established, to ensure that they're being practiced on merit rather than any perceived societal expectation. What does this process of shifting established relationships look like for you?
This is good practice for people in general, not just people in relationship anarchy, to be able to reassess the relationships that you have, which again points to what we were just talking about, which is freedom. This is an exercise of your freedom. If you don't do that, even if you're not polyamorous, you're not in relationship anarchy, right? You're not in a relationship at all. It's still important to reassess the relationships that you have, along with your values, the social norms around you, which are the anarchist principles. And existentially, the way it relates to freedom is that you might end up at some point in your life looking back after not having reassessed these things, realizing you've lived a sort of template of life based on inherited values and social norms, and feeling unfulfilled, feeling grief, a deep pit of grief over an unlived life. I do think that people ought to reassess, like the field folks say, ought to reassess our existing relationships, see what makes sense. Once you do some of that work, then you realize what you actually want.
In like actual practical sense, did anything have to change for you when you started doing that in terms of the relationships you were actually having? Like, did you have to change?
Give them the lowdown.
Yeah, did you have to give anyone the lowdown? Did you have to actually like have some hard conversations?
Yeah, I've had difficult conversations ending friendships that this was before, it was many, many years ago before I had the sort of like language that I do today. For the most part, I feel way more confident today to be able to do any of that.
Yeah.
Using words like I choose, I want, and I take responsibility for, I think makes a difference, and it allows the other person to know what you're doing isn't coming from some sort of excuse. Like, this happened to me, or when people say, oh, I can't see you tonight. Most often, the truth, the radical, honest truth, and when you're asking about radical honesty, how do you use it, is
You don't want to.
I don't want to, or I want to prioritize something else tonight
Yes.
over this. And that is not the most delicate way of speaking to people, but that level of precision can make people trust you a lot more, so that when you say things,
Yeah.
they know what you mean, they know that you care, and they know how to care about you in turn. Imagine saying to your partner, right?
Yeah.
I want or I choose to support my new partner's needs right now, which means that I take responsibility for spending less time with you this month. What I would also like to offer is that we take a weekend together for us to reconnect at the end of the month. Are you okay with that? How does that land for you? Right?
What if it doesn't land well?
If it doesn't land well, you have to be prepared for that. Example from the way that Yaz and I used to communicate was, you're allowed to feel however you want to feel about this thing, and I'm going to do it anyway. And
Damn.
I think that's where people think it's harsh. You know what I mean? Like, not caring about it, like prioritizing your desires over a partner's feelings.
If you don't, and you continue to make sacrifices to spare your partner's feelings, then you will gradually become unhappy and resent them. The communication would look something like this.
Yeah.
I say, I want to go out and see this person. Yaz might say, okay, that's bringing up a little bit of like jealousy for me, but it's something that I can work through alone, so I'm okay. Then they might ask for the type of support that they would want when I return. It'd be nice that when you come back, if we could debrief and if we could cuddle and spend some time together. That's how that would work. But if, for example, I say, oh, I want to go out on this date, and then Yaz says, actually, I just had this like catastrophe happen, right, in my life. Then you triage that shit. You say, I'm sorry, new person that I'm about to go on a date with, but I just had an emergency happen, and now I have to take care of my partner who's in distress. It doesn't stop you from thinking critically. It
doesn't stop you from caring about someone's mental health or like their well-being.
None of these like scenarios, rules will completely satisfy anybody. I knew somebody who was doing this triaging thing, and then they had a partner who was constantly in distress and needing support. And it became a sort of like codependent request for support. So this person was like getting called back from dates because this person was in distress over minor things. And the new partners were seeing that, and they're like, dude, your partner could have handled that alone. Right? So there is no perfect way to do this. And you need good agents who act in good faith using radical honesty to be able for that to run smoother rather than less smoothly.
And having boundaries. It's one thing if someone is going through a crisis and you're helping to support them through that, but constantly being in crisis, then your partner isn't taking responsibility for their own well-being and their own mental health. And that's starting to bleed onto you. And I think at a certain point, you do need to say, wherever this ultimatum is like, you need to get help for yourself. Otherwise, I can't be part of the situation because it's not aligning with my own values. Right?
I think that can apply for more than polyamory as well.
Totally.
Like, for example, I spend a lot of time and invest a lot of my time into dance and into, by the way, it's a lot of time too. Like the past 2 weeks at least, it's been every single day for 3 to 5 hours per day or more.
After work,
yeah. So it means that I have zero time other than work and dance, and very, very, very small amounts for any sort of like relationships.
Yeah. And when you're sleeping, but Netflix wants that time.
Netflix wants that time.
Yeah.
So it's like everyone's competing for this time right now. Now that's over in terms of it being every single day. However, there will soon come a time again where I'm investing a huge portion of my time into that. So I need people in my life who understand that I am not going to be free for a lot of my time.
And this would be a difficult discussion if, say, you wanted to spend that small bit of time that you have with somebody new over somebody that you have an existing relationship with.
Yeah.
And then the question could be answered in a radically honest fashion. Why is it that this is more important to you right now? And for you, you could say, well, I want to build new relationships. And if I miss out on this one right now, I fear that I will not have another opportunity. Whereas I trust the bond and the commitment that we have in this relationship could survive if I don't see you for a week or two, because I have no fears in this ending. And that person might come back with, well, I do actually, because I feel like you're slipping away.
And you're not meeting my baseline needs and then maybe that just means that relationship isn't going to work out.
That's
or
fair.
you just readjust. You say, okay, well, what am I going to put my efforts into?
Yeah.
I now have a binary choice, which sucks for many of us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Do
As
I-
us non-binary bisexuals.
Yeah. do I go with the new or do I protect the old? That comes down to your self-determination and autonomy.
Yeah.
We all know people in our queer communities who are struggling right now to make rent, to pay for school, or even find a job.
But did you know there's almost no statistical data on economic issues facing 2S LGBTQ plus people in Canada? That's because nobody has ever cared enough to study it before. And it's a huge problem that's stopping us from getting the policy and advocacy that we deserve.
But you can help change that. Because right now, there is a nationwide survey going on run by and for 2S LGBTQ plus people that's collecting data to fight for lasting change. They're based out of York University, and their team is made up of researchers, community organizations, and activists across the country.
This is the first study of its kind in Canada, and they want to hear from you. The survey is open to people of all genders, sexualities, ages, and income levels. And everything they collect will go towards helping community organizations and governments support 2S LGBTQ plus people.
So if you want to make history, head to the link in the description right now, share your experience, and as a bonus, you get a $15 Amazon gift card as a thank you. They're literally paying you to take this survey, no cost to you. So what are you waiting for? Go take it right now.
And back to the episode.
So speaking of dating and challenges in Relationship Anarchy, what is it actually like dating as someone who practices Relationship Anarchy?
Consistent communication, which again, we talked about, deploying the radical honesty, sometimes having kitchen table discussions with partners, metamours, whoever, doing check-ins, debriefs, and negotiating kind of commitments and needs. And sometimes, you'll get to a place and realize you haven't reassessed the right things, right? Like you've let some things slip by and suddenly, for some reason, you're feeling entitled to something that wasn't negotiated or assessed. Like, usually you spend this time with me. I'm like, okay, we never said that that's what we were going to do. We just ended up in this place where we're like,
Just automatically happened.
and which happens when people live together.
Yeah.
All spare time is spent with each other unless otherwise stated, which again is an implicit rule, but why does it need to be that way?
Yeah.
Right.
That time that we have is not accorded to each other just because we share the living space. We actually have to deliberately and intentionally set time to spend with each other.
Is it difficult finding people?
I was going to say.
Yeah.
Does it lower the dating pool?
Does it lower the dating pool? For sure. 100%. That's just factually true, because you'll need people who are committed to the same things as you if you're going to have that relationship. And most people are not polyamorous. Most people are not in relationship anarchy. Having said that, I don't think I'd want to build relationships with somebody who don't have these values. So it's like the dating pool for me is only the dating pool with these people who share the values. Other people are just like not in the same pool. We have different pools.
In some ways, I think as you get older, I think actually being non-monogamous, and I know relationship anarchy doesn't necessarily mean you're non-monogamous, but I think that being non-monogamous actually increases your dating pool. When a lot of people who are doing monogamy are taken,
Right.
And like that dating pool feels smaller
Interesting.
as you get older. I feel like, well, if you can date people who are in relationships, then it actually expands the dating pool.
That's an interesting point. I
I'm
never
like-
thought of it.
And
that
now
way.
that all of our friends and like so many people I know are doing non-monogamy, I'm like, I can kiss anyone.
And you will.
Blanket consent.
Nice. Nice.
Hypersexuality
Not
coming in.
blanket
I'm
consent.
gonna.
But I mean, like, everyone's open.
And everyone wants to kiss me.
Yeah, everyone wants a little smooch.
Also, if you're getting older in the monogamous world and people are single, you start being suspicious. Like, why the fuck are you single at this age?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Right?
Totally.
And then you probably ask yourself also, why am I single at
Yeah,
this
and then
age?
you're like, I'm a loser.
Nobody picked you all these years.
Do you feel like being in relationship anarchy has helped, or do you think it would help other people with like loneliness as well? Like, do you feel like it actually expands community?
Nothing's granted automatically. I could call myself a relationship anarchist and do nothing. Think in the abstract all day, but if I'm not doing anything practically about it, then it's not gonna happen. So this is part of what I've done to reassess, like that field question about reassessing those relationships. Yes, which relationships that I reassess. What I reassess the most was my friendships, and I realized just how important they are to me, and how they are the ones that bring me a lot of meaning, and how I need to treat those as my commitments for the future. These are the people I want to live with. These are the people I want to build a life with. And some of them are people who I've had sexual relationships with. Some of them are people who I've been romantic with. And some of them I'm still sexual. Some of them I'm still romantic. And some of them have changed.
Yeah.
But they're all there.
I think that's the message, honestly, is that building,
Put it on a poster.
that's it,
Yeah.
is that building and really investing in many relationships, platonic, friendship, whatever they are, is so important. You can't rely on just one person. And I think humans, we are community oriented, and that is really how you conquer loneliness. But I think I actually have a stat for this question, because I think you're kind of right based off of the stat. So according to the dating app field, 50% of relationship anarchy practitioners say that having a range of connections helps with loneliness. So I don't know. It might be what you're saying. I don't know exactly why the other 50% disagreed, but it might be that they're just not putting
They're
the
not
effort
practitioners.
I mean,
Try harder.
they're just
do better.
individualistic capitalist language. It's all your fault. You're
Why don't you pull up your bootstraps?
Yeah, you're the reason you're lonely. There's a sense in which that's also not true.
Yeah.
Like you have to take responsibility for yourself in order for change to happen.
Yes.
But there's just so many forces working against you. You can't beat these things. Not alone. So for real, you can't. Like, you can
You need unity.
You can hide out in the woods and become a hermit. It's like capitalism won. You became the most isolated idiot.
Yeah. Oh, damn.
Well, because now you
Oh, damn. That
now-
was
now
so
you're-
mean.
now you're just lacking.
The nose to the mic.
You're lacking the
Oh, no.
basic human need for relationships, right? So together we might have a better chance of going against these systems which are designed to exploit us.
And I have been doing this in the past year. I think when I discovered polyamory, just non-monogamy in general, I realized how important friendships also are. And without knowing it, had been practicing a little bit of relationship anarchy, of just really putting a lot of energy into multiple different relationships and taking out hierarchy. And like I definitely stopped putting myself on relationship escalators as well. It has felt good for me. I like that there is a sense of autonomy still to it. It's like I don't have to follow this person's rule book.
I agree with that. I do feel like that's what polyamory taught me, is how important investing in other relationships are, and more mindful of them. I'm more intentional with them.
Yeah.
I give them more of my time, where I previously thought that I was supposed to give the one person all of my time.
Yeah, and I used to slap a big hierarchy on that relationship too. For sure. So how do you go about creating a sense of structure or clarity in your relationships when you're involved with multiple partners?
It's funny because as I was sitting here, I was like, yeah, the way we talk about relationship anarchy makes it seem like you have to have a fucking PhD to join.
Yeah.
And,
Well, you do. So
but I think it is accessible to other people, even though there is a lot of theory in there. There is a lot of like language that's important, but to say that it disadvantages people who don't have an education is to conflate education with skills and knowledge, which you don't need a formal educational institution to be able to obtain. And the reason it sounds the way it does coming out of me is because I've been overeducated, and this is the language that I'm comfortable with.
I've found you've been talking in a very accessible way this whole time, but
Yeah.
I feel you
Yeah.
have.
I'd say so.
Yeah, relationality and temporality was real good for everybody there.
I don't know.
For a minute.
Those are some big words right there.
not.
Yeah.
I think that ties back into the fact that so many people unknowingly are practicing relationship anarchy because maybe you're not feeling connected to the theory of it, but you're just doing it.
Again, this work that we're doing here, the way we're talking about it, it's accessible for some people, and I think it's going to make an impact probably for the people who are unsure and don't know.
How do you create the sense of structure and clarity in relationships, though, when you're involved with multiple partners?
I started with saying that commitments are part of something that goes against one of the misconceptions of relationship anarchy, which is that, it means no commitments. Actually, it does mean commitments.
Chaos.
It means that you're working on those commitments collaboratively and more often to ensure they're still the commitments you want to keep.
So a lot of communication and constant decision making.
Yeah. So for me at least, I'm going to distinguish between deep commitments and shallow commitments.
Sure.
Okay. So deep commitments for me are often things that are just like relationship anarchy, come out of practice first and then are talked about later. So I'll realize with a friend that we've gotten to a place in our lives where we both feel like you are here for the long term. And then we say, yeah, we both feel that. I want you in my life. Now it's a choice. We got close, we're feeling it. Now let's choose it. Does that mean you have to always live in the same city? Maybe not, right? Because part of anarchy is to build communes, but also satellite, right? Satellite interconnected communes.
Take over the world.
Yeah, lots of queers have community in places like Berlin. So they'll travel from here to Berlin, and when they land there, they're in community. They're not solo. So building things like that, satellite communities, is also part of it. Now, those deep commitments are things that are less often reassessed. You don't need to necessarily always say, are you still going to be here forever? Deep commitments versus changing commitments.
Okay.
Okay. So changing commitments could be things as seemingly long-term as like living together.
It's interesting that you say living together is a shallow commitment because I wouldn't consider it that.
Yeah. It's a long-term commitment that has the potential to change.
Maybe because I'm a Taurus and I don't like to move. So I'm like, if you move in with me, you're stuck here.
Well, moving is generally not fun unless you're moving up. Right? Heyo! The reality is that most of us are renters.
Yep.
Right? So there's also that distinction when I'm talking about living together. When you're buying, that's definitely a longer term commitment. That might be a deep commitment, right? If you're buying a house with one other person, but you could also potentially buy a house with 5 other people and start a commune, which is very complicated legally and complicated relationally. And at that point, you got to write a contract and kind of stipulate what all the contingencies are. So this is what that can look like, but in more informal ways.
Yeah.
You have a sort of verbal agreement about what you're both willing to put in. What do we actually want?
Yeah.
Great. Are we both on the same page? Good. Are we not on the same page about some things? Okay, so those are still negotiable items, or they're just things that we're going to have to sit with and be like, okay, you want something else from this than I do, and that can be okay too.
What's your approach in relationship anarchy to introducing new partners to each other, and how do you handle these dynamics?
I prefer the sooner rather than later approach, and usually it's having like a communal date or a hang, let's call it. And I've been part of these as the partner who's being introduced to someone's new partner.
Do you feel waiting longer just like builds more tension and potential like overthinking about it? So it's like just like pop it in there. That was a good pop noise.
Yes, but that's not why I was thinking of that.
Okay.
I agree. That is something that would come up, especially for anxious folks.
Yeah.
But it's also wanting to be maybe appraised of the developments of that relationship so that you don't step in to witness something you were unprepared for.
Can you dumb it down for me?
Yeah. Sorry. Dial it down.
Imagine you're dating your partner. You have one partner in this scenario who you've been together with for years. They're seeing somebody new. And for the first 6 months of that relationship, you don't meet the new person because you're saying, well, I'll wait to see what happens. And and whatever. I don't have the time right now, whatever reasons. Then after 6 months, you meet this person in a setting with your partner, and you see the way that they interact with each other, the way that they share intimacy, which you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And you haven't seen the build up to that. and then you see it all together all at once, it could be a lot. And I don't just mean like touching, kissing, that kind of stuff. I mean inside jokes that they have,
Right.
right? When you hear somebody's love language being done in person, which could be the way that they refer to each other, pet names, baby talk. Yeah, the inside jokes. If you see that all at once, it could be frightening. You could be like, holy shit, I thought this was something that we had, but now what if they're using the same language that you use with your partner? Calling each other baby. What if they use different language that you think is cuter than the language you use, right? It can stir up lots of insecurities. But being connected to that other person, to your metamorph, and having that experience of the gradual as it's happening helps you understand that. And what I mean by that is it helps you accept that as a formative, important part of their relationship that you can learn to love. It enables compersion. Whereas the other thing, it kind of enables the opposite. You're like, oh.
It enables a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
That's what it enables.
Right?
Yeah.
Final question. What advice do you have for negotiating hierarchies?
Do it often. They happen, and you just need to make sure that you and your partners are on board with what's happening, or modify what's happening if you're not okay with the type of hierarchy that's emerging.
What's an example of like a hierarchy that would need to be negotiated?
Again, proximity, right? How much time are you spending with somebody new, right? Time is a limited resource, unlike love, which is what we say in the polyamory community, right? Love's not a limited resource, but time sure is. So if you're going to be spending a lot of time with a new partner during the NRE phase, right, that can hierarchically look from an external observer's perspective like one partner now has primacy over the other one.
It's bringing us back to Carbon's example that you're talking about someone might not be okay with that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people probably immediately respond to that with, I wouldn't be okay with that.
Yeah.
And this is, again, running against one of the misconceptions of relationship anarchy, which is that it's this free-for-all where new people can come in and just get as much time as the old people.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. That would be unfair and unethical. That would be an unethical way of doing relationship anarchy, is if you're just going to do that to your partners and just be like, well, it's my self-determination, it's my autonomy, and not have them participate in that decision in some meaningful way. So as a person who cares deeply about the people that I bring into my life, I wouldn't do that. So this is something that I would want to negotiate. How much time am I going to allocate to a new partner, and how do I maintain the ORE, the old relationship energy, while enjoying the NRE?
How do you keep it at bay?
I don't know that you need to.
No, I think it's like an exciting thing to enjoy, but it's just not being overcome by it and forgetting all your other connections.
How do you not drown in it? Pat, have you ever experienced a lesbian U-Haul NRE?
No, I don't have a Subaru, and I've not U-Hauled.
I've experienced it every time.
Every time.
Yes.
I read some interesting...
I mean, you witnessed Yaz and V do it.
Yeah.
You bared witness.
I was waving bye to the U-Haul. I'm so good. I can laugh about it now. But yeah, I read about this. It was funny on Reddit because I wanted to hear more about this phenomenon and why lesbians in the community actually think it's happening. Maybe the one thing I remember the most was just this insecurity that you'll ever find someone because the dating pool is small, and because queer interactions are sometimes challenging, and
Really?
the
I
force
feel like that's not my experience.
No?
Really?
I agree that scarcity might be part of it.
Maybe, but I don't know. I feel like I'd be able to find somebody because I'm a nice lady.
Wow, that's strange.
Strange because you don't see them as a lady.
Well,
Strange because I'm giving they them.
Yes, and the word lady in general is like its own weird.
I know,
Yeah.
which is why I use
Proper.
it though,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
Because
You
it
uncomfortable.
sounds funny.
I'm a nice lady.
I'm a nice lady. Yeah. So when you say like, enjoying the NRE but not letting it overtake you, I'm like, well, it happens.
I think it's being intentional. I feel I was able to do it.
Successfully?
I don't know, totally successfully. And
Successfully in a lesbian relationship?
I
That's
don't know.
not how
I think
ours went.
It was
Boom.
That's not ours.
Facts.
I'm talking about negotiating.
Calling bullshit.
This is the
Calling
last
bullshit right now.
episode
Talking
of
about-
Queer Collective.
When I was first dating Brock, and it was like I was having NRE, but I felt potentially it was coming from an anxious attachment place that I was still like really paying
Still not
attention to
lesbian.
both. Yeah, that's fair. That's why I said no, it's not lesbian.
I still have a point here. I still have ground to stand on.
Yeah.
We could turn this into a couples counseling session
Yeah.
if you like.
Yeah.
What I realized in NRE is what's similar for me, at least, with infatuation. And I found myself often when I'm attracted to people, which happened recently. I met somebody and this person was gorgeous and I started flirting and I didn't feel all the anxiety because I'm like the mentality was, well, this person's out of my league.
Yeah.
Right. Already not a good start, but that they responded back. I was like, okay, I was feeling like smooth and then they were reciprocating and the flirting was happening. And I was so infatuated and I walked away from that and I was like, wow, I feel so good. So like, and I started thinking about that. I'm like, am I treating this person as another way for me to obtain my need for approval, which is sourced in my insecurity? Clearly, I have some lack of self-worth if I need somebody who I consider to be hotter than me to also think that I'm hot, that I'm worth loving, that I'm worth looking at.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in doing that, I'm elevating this person up here and I'm not looking at all the red flags, or if there's no red flags, all the incompatibilities. And then I sat and thought about this person. I said, okay, this person has certain beliefs that I just don't align with. And I bypass that because they're so attractive. This person also has interests that are not aligned with mine, which I bypassed because of how attractive this person was. And in the process of doing all that, I realized that it would actually be a mistake if an opportunity opened up for me to date this person, because that would be a misalignment. That just settled things for me. Now, I still find them super attractive. I would still want to engage with them in perhaps a sexual relationship, but I know that moving forward to something more than that would probably not be ideal for me. And that's a way of returning back to what I want and my needs and a sense of self-worth. I'm like, I am worth something too. I can put that out there and say, here's what I want. I don't like the term deserve. I don't know if anybody deserves anything. Here's what I want. People deserve maybe dignity, respect, legally speaking. I just mean like
Food, water.
philosophically speaking, right?
Yeah.
Clean
I'm just
drinking
not
water,
comfortable.
perhaps.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with the term deserve.
Air.
I think people have rights and those should be respected. But I just mean like, here's what I want. Here's what I want, and it's okay for me to have standards, and I should really be respecting those standards and putting them out there so that I draw in the people that are going to be good for me. Look at the relationship and be critical of it. Not in a way to hurt it, but be critical of it in a way to prevent yourself from being hurt later by having overlooked the red flags or any of the other
This is a
incompatibilities.
incompatibilities.
This is a practice that I'm constantly doing, and I think we do it for each other as well, of even in our business of, is this opportunity actually aligned with our values? Is the way that we're behaving aligned with our values in terms of organizationally? Like, is this continuing to further our mission? Have we gotten off our path a little bit, and like reconnecting that? And I think that's why I really value our partnership a lot, is because we help each other kind of like stay aligned on that path.
Realign.
But I also do that for myself too, is like, why am I opening up this dating app right now? Is it because I'm feeling insecure? What's actually causing this? And like constantly checking in with yourself so that you don't get yourself off of your true aligned path. Does that make sense?
Work.
Yeah.
And you
makes
can get
sense.
pretty lost off your path if you don't check in enough.
I have an anatomical view of the body. So the usually like spiritual language doesn't resonate with me, but I do translate that into my own terms and make sense of it, which is that you are capable of recognizing your needs and the act of thinking about them and respecting them, especially as a person who might have insecurities and low self-worth, actually gives you more self-worth, more confidence.
Totally.
Pat, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences, your PhD wisdom and intellect. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys having me again and again.
And again. Thank you for coming thrice.
Oh, I didn't plug my shit.
No. I was about to ask you.
Oh, cut
Can you
that.
plug your shit?
Yeah. So last time I was here was with the so-called polyamory therapy collective, which was myself and Amanda and Lewis. And our first offering was polyamory group therapy, which was for polyamorous folks, consensually non-monogamous and monogamish people looking to open up. It has been amazing.
Yeah.
I love group therapy, and it's just
I like it too.
It's been so good. So we're starting a second round. We're looking to start at May 27th. So it'll be Tuesdays. Unlike the first round, this one will be 2 hours long instead of an hour and a half.
You have to be in Toronto?
It's in person in Toronto at our clinic, and this one's indefinite. So the first one was 8 weeks. This one's indefinite. People will come in. Some people will join later. Some people will
Come and go.
Yeah, come and go. There's Polyamory Therapy Collective, which is all one word for Instagram, polyamorytherapycollective@gmail.com for inquiries. And if you want to register for our thing, you can find it through Instagram, or you could just go to the clinic website, allofu.ca/events, and you'll see it there, the second offering of the polyamory group therapy.
So thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. And if you want to see more of Patty, you can find their other episode that we did with them called The Psychology of Kink. Please leave a like and subscribe. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, please leave us a 5-star review because it really does help the podcast out. That's everything that we got. And until next time, peace.